first question is, you once said that if a person truly harbors anger and wants to purify this anger, the best way is to look for the true nature of this anger, that is, to see where it arises from. In the end, you said that it is actually just an illusion created by discriminative thoughts. So I want to ask you, in our philosophy of mind, we also explore the true nature of the mind. I would like to ask you, in Buddhism, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, how is the mind generally viewed or understood? Because you only talked about anger earlier, I want to specifically ask about the concept of the mind itself. The second question, when you gave a lecture at Peking University, you mentioned that after Buddhism was introduced to Han and Tibetan regions, especially after 2,500 years of development, Tibetan Buddhism has preserved the Buddha's pure teachings more completely. What this means is that in our Han Chinese Buddhism, there are some teachings scattered or lost. In your opinion, what has been lost most, and what is the biggest difference compared to Tibetan Buddhism? Those are my two questions. Thank you very much.
For the first question raised regarding anger or hatred and resentment, actually, when we observe and examine anger carefully, there are some particularly exceptional and highly regarded teachings which are considered to be of great significance in certain mind training practices of Tibetan Buddhism. These teachings, no matter what kind of emotion arises in you, actually, if you observe, for example, when I am experiencing anger, and examine its origins and development, of course, this is a rather profound instruction, a kind of key point then, whether you look within your body or elsewhere, if you observe it one by one, in the end, you cannot truly find the source of your anger. No matter what we do, for example, when we feel anger toward an enemy we resent, you can't find this state of mind of mine in that person either. Nor can you find it in between, nor within myself, from head to toe, throughout my entire body. If you examine everything one by one, you simply can't find it at all. In the end, you yourself will feel that, oh, it turns out that when I am experiencing anger, it's actually just an illusion. This is something we can realize through our own observation, without needing any other logical reasoning. Anyone who has done even a little bit of dedicated and consistent practice and observes this, at this particular point, as explained in Vajrayana, this is considered to be one of the 5 distinct kinds of wisdom. So no matter how coarse, rough, or painful your state of mind is, you can either rest in the true nature of the mind, or, when you truly search for the essence of anger, you find that it is ultimately unattainable, apparent, yet lacking any inherent nature. In fact, in Chan Buddhism, this is called seeing the nature of mind and realizing one's true nature. To fully recognize the true nature of the mind is to see the mind's essence. At that moment, the essence of anger is nothing more than causing yourself distress. In reality, it is no different from empty space. This is something you will experience for yourself when you observe it personally. It's like a mute-tasting sugar, perhaps when you truly realize its essence. You may not be able to express it in words, but you will understand it yourself. Oh, when everyone is so troubled, if you truly penetrate to the nature of your mind in that very instant, this is what it is like. You will have this kind of feeling. So generally, Chan Buddhism has this kind of pith instruction, and Vajrayana has even more supreme and profound instructions. After practicing this, no matter who you are, as long as you seek, you will attain it. So among some Vajrayana practitioners, there were those who used to have very strong anger, but after encountering certain pith instructions, from that point on, their mindset completely changed. This is the reason why. As for the second question, I'm not saying that in Chinese Buddhism nowadays, some scriptures have been lost or are incomplete. That's not what I mean. But in fact, Tibetan area has a particular characteristic, which is this. From the time of the Buddha all the way to the present, whenever any of our Dharma teachers are going to give teachings or lectures, there must be an oral transmission. Without an oral transmission, the Dharma teacher is not allowed to teach. For example, when teaching the stages of the path to enlightenment, or the words of my prefect teacher, the author of the stages of the path to enlightenment is Tsongkhapa, and the author of the words of my prefect teacher is Patrul Rinpoche. Their disciples, generation after generation, must pass down the teachings. This includes the lineage of the Tripitaka that was transmitted by the Buddha at that time. It has remained completely intact in Tibetan area to this day. Of course, the disciples who inherited it afterwards, some people may have distorted certain intentions of their teachers above them, perhaps just a little. But overall, the entire lineage, which dates back more than 2,500 years ago, has seen some of the important rituals, practices, and transmissions from the Buddha's time carefully preserved up to now. So for Western countries and Western Europe, this is something especially admirable. Another point is that the translation process at that time was extremely rigorous. In Tibetan area from a historical perspective, including during the time of King Trisong Detsen, there were more than 300 translators. And those translators, when we observe them now using our own wisdom and reflect on their work with the knowledge and understanding we have today, regardless of their writing style or their understanding of the Buddhist scriptures, when we compare them with many of the Chinese translations that were produced during the Tang and Song dynasties, for example, when we compare important texts such as the Letter to a Friend and the well-known Amitabha Sutra, indeed, the translation style in Tibetan area is extremely rigorous. So, from every aspect, looking at Tibetan area today, on one hand, there is the tradition of hearing, contemplation, and practice. On the other, the complete preservation of the Kangyur, Buddhist canon. Especially regarding the Kangyur, there is a unique feature in Tibetan area. It is entirely written in colloquial language, which is very convenient for many people. By the 21st century, whenever any of us reads any case or principle from the Kangyur, it's just like reading in plain language, extremely simple. When we read many different versions of the Buddhist canon in the Han region today, especially nowadays and currently, when people are so busy with their daily lives and responsibilities, classical Chinese is hard to get. If you can't and there's no explanation, you just give up. Let alone the entire canon, sometimes you don't even want to read a single scripture because the language is just too obscure. So, looking at it from several different perspectives, we feel that the transmission of Buddhism in Tibetan area is still quite good overall. Precisely because of this, in the Han region and other regions outside the Han region, throughout history, there are more and more people who are increasingly studying Tibetan Buddhism, and there must be some special reasons for that, likely.
Hello, Master. I am a second-year graduate student majoring in Marxist philosophy.
What Marx? You studies Marx, Marxist philosophy?
Yes, Marxist philosophy. But I was born and raised in a Catholic family. As a Christian, I also believe in the existence of a future world. But we feel that this is God's revelation, and we just need to believe in it. But after listening to the Master's lecture yesterday, I heard that you also believe in past and future lives. So I'd like to ask the Master, why do you so firmly believe in things that cannot be grasped in the secular world? Why do you believe with such devotion? My second question is about doing good deeds and helping others, making a positive impact. As a Christian, sometimes I feel that I don't truly want to do good deeds from the heart. Maybe it's for some utilitarian purpose, like wanting to go to heaven and not to hell. But I also heard Teacher Gao say before that when we help others, we often feel really very happy inside and experience a sense of happiness. I think the second kind is pure and feels better. So I'd like to ask the Master, how can we do good deeds more purely in our daily lives? How can we live out our faith? Also, listening to the Master speak brings great peace to my heart. I really like the Master. Thank you.
Actually, for us human beings, truly believing in our past and future lives, it's not without reason, as you might expect. If we believe in past and future lives without any real justification at all, for example, then that would be superstition. So whether it's in Buddhism or for those who study Marxist philosophy, it's not something we should blindly pursue. But if it is the truth and we ignore it in our lives, even though it matters, that would also be unscientific and not a philosophical attitude. So, as I mentioned yesterday, like I said before, if you want to understand the reasoning behind the existence of past and future lives, there are indeed very rich and profound teachings on this subject. But these teachings can't be covered in just 1 or 2 classes. In Tibetan area, we specifically study the Pramanavartika, explanation on the 2nd chapter of the commentary on valid cognition. It is explained that by Dharmakirti, the great philosopher, used many philosophical arguments to prove the existence of past and future lives. Because, from the perspective of psychology, the concept of past and future lives is extremely profound. It's something that our eyes cannot see and our minds cannot directly grasp. Therefore, we must rely on the words of Shakyamuni Buddha and our own reasoning, using both to establish the argument. First, how do we establish the validity of Shakyamuni Buddha's words? Let's start by saying that over the course of more than 40 remarkable and dedicated years of turning the Dharma wheel, has there been any science or any truth that has refuted or undermined his teachings? If there has been no such refutation, then, as people in the world say, if someone never lies even once, then what he says can serve as a basis. This is one method of reasoning. Another method of reasoning is entirely that our present moment of consciousness arises from the preceding moment of mind. In this regard, there is a complete system of logical reasoning. So, through this kind of reasoning, in the end, each of us comes to know, oh indeed, past and future lives exist. Of course, I think that as long as a religion acknowledges the existence of past and future lives, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism, there are still commonalities. In the past, Galileo and Newton both notably acknowledged the existence of future lives. They were afraid of hell and sincerely hoped to rise up and ascend to heaven. These were their views, due to their beliefs. So, many scientists also believed in the existence of past and future lives. In fact and reality, their acceptance was not blind faith at all. I personally think Christianity must have its own complete and comprehensive theoretical system and framework. Otherwise, these scientists couldn't have believed blindly without proper evidence in any circumstance either. That's one particular concern to be aware of in our practice and daily life. And regarding what you just said about doing good deeds, if I may add, this is how I personally see it from my perspective. In Buddhism, when we generate bodhicitta, genuinely benefiting sentient beings is actually considered to be placed first. If in Buddhism one puts their own aspiration to attain Buddhahood first, that's not ultimate. The mindset of always helping others around you should be put first. This is the true and compassionate embodiment of bodhicitta. So I think Christianity does a significant amount of charitable work and support in many places. Some of it has utilitarian motives, but some truly and deeply comes from witnessing sentient beings in great, immense and overwhelming suffering. I have previously seen, for example, some of Mother Teresa's notable actions in her life and ministry, including some of Gandhi's ideas and philosophies on non-violence that he developed over many years, regardless of which religion it is or what tradition it represents. We should all live in harmony, understand each other, and be mutually accommodating. But the most crucial thing, what is truly worth embracing, is the essence of altruistic thought. Wherever the essence of altruism is truly embodied in a person, it is worth our careful learning. And whichever religion it appears in, it is also worth our acceptance. So I also have this feeling myself. For example, if I am especially tired one day, but I have helped some people during that day, then in my heart I feel that even though I was very tired today, I still managed to help some people in need. That makes it worthwhile, meaningful. If I spend a whole day being extremely busy, but it's all just for my own fame and personal gain, then I feel very ashamed. I can't even call myself a Buddhist, let alone a Mahayana Buddhist. I'm far too ashamed for that. If every day is just for myself, then there's really no difference between me and a yak. Yaks also live for themselves. They eat grass and drink water each and every single day, and it's exhausting for them too in their daily lives. There's no difference between me and an animal as sentient beings. I feel that it's meaningless. Therefore, regardless of which religion it is, what we all seek together is to benefit others. This is crucial.
Master, hello. I have two questions I'd like to ask you. I'm a graduate student in the philosophy department at Huaxi, studying Eastern thought and traditions. My first question is, there is a Western philosopher named Puro who advocated skepticism, that is, not expressing any opinions and maintaining inner peace. So my question is, when we are feeling restless, this is just my personal view, I feel that society is very restless. In such a restless society, how can we let go? Especially for us, contemporary graduate students and doctoral students. How can we let go of distracting thoughts and maintain inner peace? That's my first question. Now, my second question is, I feel that whether it's Buddhism, Christianity, or Islam, such as, they all originated abroad and were introduced into China. This also encompasses modern concepts that are fundamental, like freedom, democracy, and equality. My question is, it seems that native Chinese culture doesn't have strong influence. I feel that, in my opinion, Chinese culture doesn't really seem to be guiding the direction of the world at present. I'd like to ask the Master, how do you view this phenomenon? Thank you.
Regarding your first question, I think that sometimes in certain situations, maintaining silence, not expressing opinions on many matters in the world, is also a kind of mental state or frame of mind. Especially in Chan Buddhism and Vajrayana, when one reaches a certain level, one feels that all things in the world are illusory and unreal, so expressing many opinions doesn't have much meaning. From the Buddhist perspective, in the ultimate truth, everything is inexpressible. In conventional truth, although there are phenomena that are like illusions or dreams, these are all ultimately unreal. Therefore, generally speaking, some Western philosophical ideas may also have their own deeper meanings. As you just mentioned, as a graduate student or doctoral student, in your future academic and personal life, remaining silent on many superficial or restless issues actually requires a kind of thoughtful training. I've heard that you often have summer camps at this location for this kind of training. Some meditative ideas are also present in Vajrayana Buddhism as well. Some time ago, I gave a talk to some of our internal intellectuals on finding comfort and ease in meditation. In fact, through meditation, the mind can truly find rest and a sense of peace. Sometimes in such a bustling and lively city, filled with constant movement and noise, people are always in a kind of dazed or confused state, often feeling mentally tired or overwhelmed by the fast pace of urban life. It's impossible to calm your natural, original state of mind, especially when emotions are running high. But when you go to a particularly quiet mountain, or when you enter a quiet mountain cave in solitude and silence, you can feel an inner peace arise within your mind and heart very naturally. So I think that nowadays, many intellectuals, whether it's a 7-day or 14-day meditation retreat, such activities are really very necessary for their state of mind. In fact, many psychologists now believe that our physical health is actually very closely related to our mental state. If people regularly enter into meditation, whether it's in the morning when they wake up or at night before sleep, and maintain a calm mind, especially for many of you university students who haven't yet entered society. Once you do, there will be a significant amount of pressure and a significant amount of suffering that you may have to face. If you just follow along with that suffering, your whole life might end up being very hard. No matter how much money or status you have, you'll still be unhappy. So if you have some skill in meditation, no matter what happens outside, as long as I do my best, that's enough. There are some things that, no matter how much I worry, I still might not get them. So I just try to maintain a calm and peaceful state of mind. In fact, some teachers and intellectuals have actually developed this beneficial habit ever since their childhood. It greatly benefits their lives, including their mental and physical health. So I think, first of all, living a life of regular meditation on a daily basis might be the best approach in the long run for cultivating inner peace and wisdom. Can you repeat your second question once more, please?
It's about unique Chinese culture.
Yes, Chinese culture. Actually, it's not really that Chinese culture can't be accepted elsewhere in the world. For example, take Confucian culture, the ideas of Confucius and Mencius. For example, in South Korea, I've been there before, as well as Singapore and Canada, for instance. They have fully adopted the etiquette and values of Confucianism, the teachings of Confucius and Mencius. And it's just like when Buddhism from India was introduced to China back in the day, many centuries ago, in ancient times, through dedicated monks. In India itself, the original form of Buddhism has basically disappeared from the land over the years. When I visited India in 1990, I saw that most of the Buddhist temples there were all Tibetan Buddhist temples that had been brought to India in the 1950s and then carefully restored and revived there. Much of the original Buddhism in India itself, in particular, has basically disappeared over time. Tibetan Buddhism in India, just like in our Han regions, has been significantly revived once again in recent years. So in the same way, I think nowadays, China also likes to embrace ideas from other foreign religions. But as for our own Confucian thought, it is often, like I just mentioned, the standards for being a good student and child, dizigui. In many schools in our Han regions, dizigui is not given much importance, including some middle-aged people because of the Criticize Lin, Criticize Confucius campaign at the time. All of Confucius's ideas were completely eradicated and lost. But often, in other ethnic groups and other places, these ideas are very well received with great enthusiasm and interest. For example, in Korea and other Asian countries, many of our ideas have been fully embraced over time. So it's not that we can't accept other cultures from various traditions around the world. Actually, every sentient being, or you could say their circumstances and conditions, may be different in many significant ways that matter.
I am deeply and sincerely grateful to the Khenpo Lama for guiding me onto the correct and meaningful path in life. I have two questions. The first question is, If a person is able to recite the Vajrasattva mantra 400,000 times, recite the Amitabha mantra 1 million times, or recite Amitabha 6 million times, does that guarantee rebirth in the Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss? But most of the time, I am reciting while walking on the street, riding in a car, or editing articles online. Does this meet the requirements of the practice correctly? Or does it only count if I recite while sitting in meditation with full concentration and focus? This is my first question. My second question is that I know Khenpo Lama is very interested in quantum mechanics. A few years ago, I published a book on quantum mechanics. Recently, I have been listening to Khenpo's teachings on Madhyamaka in the Bodhi group. I have an idea. After finishing my study of Madhyamaka, I want to add a section at the end of my quantum mechanics book. To briefly write a section that explores the fascinating relationship between quantum mechanics and Buddhism. I'm not sure if, as a beginner, it's appropriate for me to write about this topic. Secondly, if I actually manage to write it, I wonder if Khenpo would perhaps have time to review it for me and, if possible, correct any mistakes at his convenience.
All right, regarding the first question you raised with me today, when we're reciting Vajrasattva or Amitabha while riding in a car or walking around in daily life, going about our normal activities and routines, of course, the effect may not be extremely focused, but completing the recitations in terms of quantity is also very important. To make up for some shortcomings in our daily practice, we might perhaps need to recite more frequently, as well as increase the amount. In Tibetan area, if we find that our own recitation isn't done with a very focused mindset, to make up for this gap, we recite several tens of thousands more times. This is also a common practice. Now, the second question. Teacher Wang has been engaged in education, and I heard it's been close to 40 years of dedicated service. You've been teaching and nurturing people all along, which I greatly admire and respect deeply. In my county back home, there was an education conference held not long ago with many participants attending it. Across the whole county, there was only one teacher who had taught for 35 years without interruption or break. So it's very rare and truly remarkable in our times. With such teaching experience accumulated over the decades and a mindset close to that of quantum mechanics, and then integrating it with Madhyamaka philosophy, in fact, creating such treatises is very necessary. I've thought about this before myself. Although I'm not a professional in quantum mechanics, I'm interested in it and have read many books on the subject. This book aligns very well with the Madhyamaka analysis of particles in philosophy and their nature. So if it's possible to write such books that bridge science and Buddhism, I will also do my best to contribute something meaningful. I can't claim to have read everything in complete detail at this point in time, but I truly admire it very much indeed. For us scientists, as well as us Buddhists from different backgrounds and traditions, if we can work together and unite with common purpose and vision, we should strive to leave behind things that benefit humanity within our limited lifespans. In this way, it may truly benefit future generations and other people with the right connections who seek the truth and wisdom. So this is a goal we should all strive for together with dedication and effort.
Hello, Master. I am a doctoral student at the Center for Mind and Cognition Research at Central China Normal University. I have two questions, Master. The first concerns philosophy of mind, a branch of analytic philosophy. Its main method is analytic.
From the Buddhist perspective, this analytic method should be considered a form of discriminating wisdom.
But I have heard that Buddhism is a kind of non-discriminating wisdom. So, my first question for you, Master, is this. What is the relationship between these two kinds of wisdom in your view? My second question I would like to ask you, Master, using a line from the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra says, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. I've heard two different interpretations of this line. The first interpretation treats is as a copula, a linking word. This interpretation believes that is means is exactly, so form is emptiness means form is exactly emptiness. The second interpretation separates ji and she into two words. Here, ji is a verb meaning inseparable from. It's the same meaning as in the phrase rojiroli, to be close yet distant. Sh is regarded as a pronoun, specifically meaning that or this. So the meaning of form is emptiness is that form cannot be separated from emptiness, and emptiness cannot be separated from form. I would like to ask the Master, how do you view this statement? Thank you.
Alright, regarding this particular matter, the very first question that we need to address and consider is, in the process of psychological cognition, there are many discriminating thoughts. Actually, when we practice Buddhism, there are also two states, one with discriminating thoughts and one without. For example, when we practice Zen meditation, we first do analytical meditation. In analytical meditation, as I mentioned, we ask, does my mind exist? Does the mind have color? Does it have shape? Is the mind now abiding in stillness? We keep using discriminating thoughts to maintain this process. At this time, this is also a form of Zen. This is called analytical meditation. There is also a quiet type, which is called tranquil meditation. In the end, it's like letting a child gradually fall asleep. The state of truly being asleep is very different from the state of falling asleep gradually. Ultimately, the state without discrimination and attachment is actually the true and genuine state of being, when we seek any truth and understanding. Using discrimination is actually absolutely essential in many situations. If we don't even have this, and we directly enter a non-discriminating state from the very beginning, then this kind of meditation can be dangerous, because nothing is being contemplated at all. If you don't consider what is good or bad, how is this different from deep sleep? It's hard to tell true from false. So when we practice, we first do analytical meditation, then calm meditation. This is how practice works. Just now, your kind of discrimination, although it is a discriminating thought, the discriminating thought that seeks truth is necessary. When you reach the final highest state, you can let go of this discriminating thought and abide in the true state. It's like when we cross a river, we need a boat. But once we reach the shore, we leave the boat behind. Then you can go directly to your intended destination. So Buddhism often uses this kind of analogy. The second question, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. In fact, in Tibetan, the meaning of is or just is, why do we say form is emptiness? Because the true nature of form, if you really observe it, apart from emptiness, there is actually nothing else at all. Actually, all phenomena of emptiness, in their marvelous and wondrous function and manifestation, can in fact appear as form. So, any form that we see now is actually just like the reflection in a mirror. Its true nature is like the moon reflected in water. There's really nothing there. The moon in the water is actually emptiness, and within emptiness, the moon in the water also appears. Existence and non-existence are just terms. They are not the same. In fact, its true nature is emptiness. So in Buddhism, at the highest level, appearance and emptiness are truly and completely inseparable. Appearance is emptiness, and emptiness is appearance. The two are not different or separate. It's not that the two were separate before and merge into one when you realize it, not at all. They have been this way from the beginning. It's just that sentient beings are confused by ignorance and discriminating thoughts and don't know the original nature. When we observe our own mind, we can see this. When the mind is manifesting, its true nature is emptiness. It is precisely because its nature is empty that it can manifest. If its nature were not empty, manifestation would be impossible. So in this regard, we need to delve into the deeper realms of Madhyamaka or Prajna teachings. Through practice and realization, one can truly and fully understand their profound meaning.
Hello, Master. Generally, when people come into contact with religion, there are two main approaches. The first is to have faith first, and then seek understanding. The second is to understand first, and then develop faith. As for me personally, I was exposed to some Buddhist texts from a young age, such as Journey to the West, as well as places like Shaolin Temple and Songshan, Henan, and so on. Later on, I developed a certain personal understanding and knowledge regarding Buddhism, and became interested in it. I would like to ask the Master, what is your view on these two approaches? My second question is, as someone from Henan myself, Shaolin Temple in Songshan is a cultural symbol, not only for us in Henan, but also for all of China. It is a cultural icon. A few years ago, notably because the abbot Shi Yongxin commercialized the historic and renowned Shaolin Temple, it sparked heated discussions across all sectors of society. So, what is your perspective on this issue? Thank you.
Let's start with wisdom or faith first. Both of these approaches and methods are equally valid and effective. Some people begin with wisdom initially, while others start their spiritual path with faith first. For those with particularly strong faith, at first there may be some elements of superstition involved. But as they gradually reach the true realm of Buddhism, they realize, oh, what I believed in at the beginning wasn't actually quite right. but later on, after some time, they genuinely and authentically enter the correct domain. There's also another way, which is to start by learning through various channels. Both of these approaches are certainly feasible in practice. Of course, with either approach, as you might expect, if your faith or wisdom is lacking in your journey, you might develop mistaken attachments and misconceptions easily. That's the first important point to remember clearly. Secondly, regarding what you just mentioned about Shaolin Temple earlier, whether it's online or in the news media today, people from all walks of life have many different opinions and perspectives on this. Actually, when we first had Shaolin Temple and Journey to the West, I think on one hand, many people came to understand Buddhism and gained some faith through them. So, in that respect, they indeed played a significant role. On the other hand, they actually made people see Buddhism as a kind of mythology, which ultimately brought about a particularly negative phenomenon. Especially in these movies and some television dramas and shows, it was all primarily because of the national policies and social background of the 1980s era in China. For various reasons, many directors, including myself, have encountered many well-known scriptwriters and directors from that time. I said, you might have gained some merit, but you also ruined the virtuous roots of many people. Why is that? Because in many movies it's like, oh, I became a monk. And in the end, when there's no way out, the only choice is to become a monk. Now, many people, including when they see monks, think, oh, has this person perhaps suffered some kind of trauma? In the end, the only choice is really to go to a monastery. This is quite common among Chinese people. Westerners are not like this because there isn't this kind of media portrayal. For this reason, many of the current misunderstandings about Buddhism often come from certain sources, such as motion pictures and films. These factors are inseparable from it. Just now you mentioned some things about Shaolin Temple. For example, its commercialization of Buddhist practices, such as adapting traditional rituals for modern audiences. Actually, if our Buddhism were like Master Taishu's approach, and truly promoted humanistic Buddhism at that time, it would have been necessary, but humanistic Buddhism has become too secularized. The original fundamental teachings and doctrines of Buddhism are entirely and completely absent in this context. If in the end it becomes entirely commercialized, then that's just business, not Buddhism. Nowadays, for example, a single stick of incense can sell for thousands or even tens of thousands of yuan. Many of these so-called inventions, regardless of whether they are ultimately beneficial or not to sentient beings, is in fact quite hard to say with certainty. Overall, whether we are actively promoting the Dharma or simply maintaining and supporting the faith of devoted believers, it may require everyone's collective wisdom, careful discernment, and thoughtful observation. That is precisely why we always emphasize, time and again, that as Buddhists, there's really no need for so much involvement in economic matters. What Buddhism truly needs most right now is nourishment and sustenance for the mind. Buddhists are eager to learn, eager to understand, and are full of sincere faith, but they can't find a way in. They haven't yet found a truly good and wise teacher. So what is truly needed in temples nowadays in particular is wisdom. As for faith, some people may have it. Every festival, the temples are always truly packed with people. But most people are just seeking peace and safety. Very few are truly seeking the ultimate truth or liberation in the next life. So many of us now really need authentic and genuine Buddhism. Therefore, some commercialization and popularization might have some significance for spreading the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings. But perhaps it doesn't have much real meaning or value. That's why, personally, I am unwilling and reluctant to judge others harshly or critically, even if I see clearly that someone's behavior is not particularly good or appropriate. As long as there isn't a special reason, I won't say anything in any situation. I neither offer excessive praise nor harsh criticism. It's really hard to judge many people's actions on a personal level. The Buddha also said that, except for himself, it's generally very difficult to truly know others' actions. But from the overall and comprehensive perspective of Buddhism, if things become perhaps too commercialized or too focused on worldly matters, there may be a wide range of various different opinions that could arise. So now, as I keep emphasizing, what Buddhists need most is great compassion and wisdom. Great compassion and wisdom truly are the essence of Buddhist thought. If these are promoted anywhere, we rejoice wholeheartedly. As for other behaviors and intentions, if they benefit sentient beings, we should praise them. If they are completely meaningless to sentient beings and even harm their virtuous roots, then we simply do not praise them. That's exactly how it is.
Hello, Master. I am a doctoral student admitted by Professor Gao. I would like to ask 2 questions. The first is that in Theravada Buddhism, it is taught not to harm others. In Mahayana Buddhism, it is taught not only not to harm others, but also to help them. For example, at my workplace, there are some science and engineering teachers around me. Sometimes, when they work on certain projects, the returns are extremely high, several million or more. After receiving this money, they travel all over the country buying various houses and commercial properties. I often tell them, you should learn from the teachings of Buddhism. Buying so many houses, you can't possibly live for several lifetimes. I tell them, you could use part of that money to help others, to do charity. They ask me, isn't it enough if I simply just don't harm others at all? If I do charity, others might not even appreciate it. So, how should I perhaps help enlighten them properly and effectively? My second important question is, what do you think is the main root cause of ignorance? I think that by understanding this question, we can practice better. In your personal opinion, what makes a skilled and effective practitioner? Do you have a particular standard for this? Thank you.
Actually, many people who have money may, in fact, often be unwilling to do charity. It's not necessarily because their practice of the Hinayana is very good. Maybe it's just an excuse. In Hinayana, we also talk about not harming others, but the practitioners themselves live a particularly simple and desireless life. In any of the Hinayana texts, such as the Vinaya Sutra or the Agama Sutras, many scriptures emphasize that one should try to eliminate attachment to the 5 desires, greed, anger, and so on, completely. So, if a person has a great deal of wealth and possessions, nowadays many people are rather blind and obsessed about it. A wealthy person might keep buying houses and cars in various cities constantly and excessively. In this way, human greed truly becomes limitless. If you buy a house in this city, then you feel that's not enough. You want properties in every city, and even after you have money, you might still not be satisfied. Oh, that's not enough. You think you should go to Canada and then to the United States and to various other places. The other day, I met a professor from Cambridge University. She said that in the United Kingdom there is a wealthy individual who has a fortune amounting to several $100 million. Her greed has grown to a frightening extent, and she doesn't even have any descendants. But she keeps buying houses in different places, and just the property management fees alone cost her millions. Yet she still keeps buying more. Sometimes, when you see her behavior up close, it's actually quite pitiful. But there's no way to persuade her otherwise. So in this world we live in, some things we might be able to convince people of through reasoning. But for some things, even if you really try to explain, it still might not work. They might feel that their own personal choices are more reasonable. That's just how it is. Now, the second question. You mentioned the origin of ignorance. I also touched on this a bit yesterday. Actually, ignorance perhaps arises suddenly. It should be said that it's like clouds in the sky. It has its own causes and conditions. But these causes and conditions are essentially in reality a kind of delusion. This delusion does not exist in the true original nature of sentient beings, the Tathagatagarbha. It is simply that over a long period of time, it gradually becomes a cause for sentient beings' confusion. Just like when compared to the vastness of space, clouds are not the true fundamental essence. So in some tantras of Vajrayana Buddhism, the rust that forms on steel, the causes and conditions for rusting, are actually not the true nature of the steel itself. But rust can suddenly appear due to moisture in the summer and certain climatic factors. It's because of such causes and conditions. Rust does not have the same solid and enduring nature as steel. That's how it should be understood. Ultimately, we reach a certain stage in our spiritual practice. There are different levels or stages in spiritual practice. For example, Chan Buddhism has many different states or levels of realization. When we cultivate bodhicitta, there are also many stages. So in every process, there are different standards within the particular practice you are following. Just like university students have specific standards for being qualified students, middle school students have their own distinct standards as well to meet. So when we talk about spiritual practice, it is actually a very broad and comprehensive term. Each stage and level is different.
Hello, Master. I am also a student from the Philosophy Department at Central China Normal University. Just now, listening to your answer to Zhao's question, I was also greatly inspired. You said that whether one first understands and then believes, or first believes and then understands, including what you mentioned in your lecture to us last night, you hope that students can start from the basic theories and foundational principles of Buddhism when they begin to study Buddhism, so that they are able to gradually strengthen their own faith. I have only one question to ask at this point. Chairman Mao once said the following words, it's easy for a person to do a good deed, but it's hard to do good deeds for a lifetime. For now, I'd like to interpret good deed as a virtuous act. What I want to say is that we as students are now at school, receiving guidance from our teachers and learning on our own. So in our daily lives, we may naturally perform some good deeds or pursue a kind of faith for various reasons. But when we enter society and are faced with real interests, can we still maintain and hold firm to our beliefs and values? I think that's something very hard to guarantee. And if we look at all our countries, the democratic processes in some countries and the history of the Ming and Qing dynasties in China all overemphasized moral education and neglected building systems and the rule of law, leading to decline. Also, if we look now, many famous business figures and high-ranking officials, the reason they choose to believe is simply to pursue greater power or to gain more benefits. They want to protect their current interests. So, under the influence of such powerful motives and drives, when they believe temporarily or embrace religion for a short time, how long can such faith really last? So my question is, specifically in this new situation, how can we balance the important roles of moral education and institutional development? Thank you very much, Master.
Your question is also really very good and insightful. I'm not sure if I actually mentioned this yesterday or not. I often think about how when we meet good teachers at school and when students have just graduated from school recently, their mindset is very calm and their hearts are pure. Everyone has certain ideals or aspirations of their own. They are determined to strive for success and to contribute meaningfully to society, their families, and the country. However, after entering society and experiencing real life, in just 2 or 3 years, that original courage and ambition are basically gone. Many people have already been influenced by the pressures of society, and because the temptations are so strong, they eventually have really no choice but to simply go along with the crowd. In Buddhism's the great treatise on the perfection of wisdom text, there's a vivid metaphor and example used, where a basin of hot water is poured onto a large, solid block of ice in winter time. At first, when you pour the hot water on it, the water is warm, but gradually it gets frozen solid by the ice completely and irreversibly. So, for many college students, perhaps we should actually be mentally prepared for this. This kind of preparation, some people, in fact, manage to do good deeds and charity work throughout their entire lives and are able to maintain their mindset. Some people start out with a very good mindset, but once they enter society, they unknowingly get swept away and lost by the waves of the secular world around them. So I personally think the most important question to ask is, how do we maintain this mindset steadily? Long-term habituation is very important. And what you know, for example, if we want to do public welfare, do charity, do good deeds, it's not just theoretical. If it's only theoretical, you'll forget it quickly and it won't last long. But from deep within, you really need to have a kind of determination. If you have that determination, I think even now, many intellectuals, even though modern society is so chaotic and turbulent today, still live very pure and virtuous lives and do meaningful and important work for others and society. There are actually many such people around us. For example, I think of the respected Professor Gao, who has written so many important books and publications and has been engaged in education for such a long time with great dedication. This is truly sacred and admirable. I'm not someone who praises a person just because I see them. But you should also see for yourselves, clearly and honestly, constantly being with students and interacting in this kind of challenging academic environment day after day, staying in the role of a teacher. This is actually very admirable. Otherwise, when people have even a little bit of ability, and this happens where we are, as soon as they have some ability, they immediately start building houses or running businesses. Many teachers' hearts are not in teaching anymore. They think they should be outside, engaging in all kinds of activities. So we really hope that in the future we can make this kind of commitment while at school. I'd rather not be very successful in my career or financially, but I want to do things that are meaningful to humanity. In this way, I believe the power of the heart is truly immense. Many of our own actions can be restrained by this.
Hello, Master. I am a graduate student at the School of Political Science and Law. I would like to ask, today and yesterday, you have imparted a lot of knowledge about goodness to us, and we have all benefited greatly. But I have a question here regarding the standards for judging good and evil. Some people say it's about good intentions, while others say it's about good results. For example, there are people who, like you and Professor Gao, are engaged in charity work, but their motivation is more about seeking fame and recognition. Even if it's for fame and profit, they still help many people in different situations and achieve some positive outcomes overall. However, there are others whose intentions may be genuinely good, but often end up doing bad things despite having well-meaning intentions. So my question is, when it comes to the standards or criteria for judging goodness, which is actually more important, intention or outcome, which is closer to the Buddha's teachings? Thank you.
When comparing good intentions and good actions carefully, actually, pure intention is very important and fundamental in practice. In Buddhism, we say clearly, if the mind is good, the path is good too. If your mind is good, your future will be bright. If your mind is evil, your future will be dark. Or, the distinction between good and evil lies in the difference in intention, not in the difference in outward actions. Of course, some people may use charity or doing good deeds, or claim to believe in or promote religion in the name of faith, perhaps in order to promote some of their own other values, perhaps even, or to raise their own profile. There are all kinds of motives. In fact, this kind of behavior only appears good on the surface, but the heart is not good. If your heart is truly good and pure, even if what you do is not perfect or not very successful, but in the Buddhist scriptures, as it is said, there are immeasurable and boundless merits and virtues. So, when it comes to the standard of good and evil, it's best to judge by the heart. If your heart is free from selfishness and self-interest and is entirely for the benefit of all beings, then this pure and compassionate mindset should be considered the highest form of goodness possible. Therefore, whether we are doing charity or good deeds for others, it is inevitable that there will be some misunderstandings from others, including charity work. For example, I once spoke about this at the International Charity Forum in Beijing. Right now, there are no official laws in place for charity work. On top of that, many people don't understand and wonder if charity is really motivated by some ulterior purpose or other intentions. But in reality, without the support and generosity provided by charity, many children in the world today would not even have the opportunity to go to school or receive an education. When everyone's efforts are combined and we work together, even if we are only able to help one child attend school or save the life of a single patient in need, the difference we make is significant and meaningful. That in itself should be considered a very meaningful thing. So whether it's individuals or larger groups and organizations, everyone possesses a special and unique power of love and compassion. This is truly something that modern society really needs desperately today. And for individuals, it also has a real and deeply fulfilling significance in life.
Hello, Master. I was very fortunate to have a chat with you yesterday and to listen to your lecture. I feel I gained a lot from it. I would like to ask you, Master, the Sutra of Wise and Foolish mentions the impermanence of the four sides. All things must end, gatherings, wealth, life, and success. I would like to kindly ask the Master for your understanding of this, and perhaps how it applies a bit more to our lives.
The sutra says that all who rise high must eventually fall, all gatherings must eventually disperse, and all who are born must eventually die. These fundamental Buddhist principles and teachings are actually very important and valuable for everyone. I often think to myself, if we had a dedicated course like this in our university curriculum and educational system, on the surface it seems very simple, just a single verse. But after many students and teachers come to truly understand this principle, when you encounter suffering in life, you have the inner ability to face it. For example, nowadays, many people commit suicide, and suicides keep happening in universities everywhere. Actually, the reasons for suicide, for many of them, some are because of all gatherings must eventually disperse. Relationship issues, today you come together, but tomorrow fate causes you to part. Things that are meant to end should end, but because they don't understand this principle, they feel very sad. Some are because all who rise high must eventually fall. They didn't achieve their wishes, And then some are because all who are born must eventually die. If you are born, you must eventually die. When your friends and family inevitably pass away, including yourself, when you face death or are diagnosed with a terminal illness, when you are critically ill, you find yourself unable to face it. There was a time during my elementary school years with my graduating students, there were about 30 of them, and when they graduated, they all cried together. They said, "Tomorrow we'll be leaving our alma mater," and everyone cried. So I specifically talked about these things. I told them, "Today I want to leave you with a lesson. Whatever reaches its peak will decline. Whoever is born will die. Whatever comes together will disperse. Whatever is accumulated will be exhausted." Wealth has already been accumulated, but in the end, it all disappears. All of it is gone. Remember these 4 aspects very carefully. Maybe this will be especially beneficial for your future life. When you face life and face this world, if you understand this principle, you won't selfishly insist on getting your way. Otherwise, many young people nowadays, because they haven't achieved their personal wishes and aspirations in life, or because others have done things to you that go against their conscience and morals, they immediately choose suicide or do many unwise or irrational things without thinking carefully. So I personally think this important Buddhist principle is discussed in great detail by Patrul Rinpoche in the famous Words of My Perfect Teacher. Everyone should really take a moment to carefully take a look. It should be truly meaningful and valuable for both your spiritual practice and also for your everyday life as well.
I'm a philosophy student at East China Normal University. I have a question. After realizing emptiness, is one no longer bound by the law of cause and effect? The Maharatnakuta Sutra records the incident where the Buddha appeared to eat horse fodder for 3 months. Did the Buddha experience the effects of karma and retribution? Thank you.
Generally speaking, after realizing emptiness, one is no longer subject to karmic retribution. However, in some scriptures, including the Maharatnakuta Sutra, the Buddha also spoke about this. He experienced many results of karma, actually. As explained in some scriptures, this is an appearance on the surface. For example, when the Buddha was on the path as a bodhisattva in previous lives, he did certain things. Later, things like being pierced or other hardships. These should be understood as manifestations. In Buddhism, it is said that sutras can be definitive or provisional in meaning. The Buddha gave some teachings to show the importance of karma and its effects. So he would say, "In my past lives, I did certain things, and even after becoming a Buddha, I still have to experience these karmic results." But in fact, when the Buddha had already reached the highest realization of emptiness, he should not be subject to karmic retribution in the same way as ordinary beings. So why did the Buddha say this? Because many sentient beings think that if even the Buddha experiences such severe karmic consequences, then how much more so for people like us? So the Buddha's provisional teachings had a clear and specific purpose in mind. By using this kind of skillful language and approach, he helped numerous people believe in karma and its effects deeply. For example, take a teacher. He himself may not have such intentions or inclinations personally. But in order to guide these children, these students, onto the right path in their lives, I also do this, so you should do the same. These students have really great trust in their teacher. Oh, if our teacher does this, then why shouldn't we also do it too? So sometimes it's also perhaps necessary for teachers to say things to students that aren't entirely realistic. In Buddhist scriptures, some of the Buddha's teachings are provisional. These are not lies. They have hidden meaning and serve a purpose. There is also a skillful way of speaking for sentient beings. So what you just mentioned from the Maharatnakuta Sutra, it actually has a hidden meaning, which is not immediately apparent and may require some thought or reflection to fully understand.
Hello, Master. I am a doctoral student from the Department of Philosophy. I have a question regarding causality. The concept of causality holds a very important and significant place in Buddhism. That is to say, if you plant beans, you will get beans. If you plant melons, you will get melons. Where there is a cause, there must be an effect, and where there is an effect, there must be a cause. The cycle of cause and effect, retribution never fails. If that's the case, suppose someone committed the karma of killing in a previous life, then in this life he is certainly bound to face retribution. For him to receive retribution, there must be an enforcer. If this enforcer does not take retaliatory action or response against him, then the inevitability of cause and effect seems to be broken in this particular situation.
But if he does retaliate, then he himself cannot lay down the butcher's knife and instantly become a Buddha. Take Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, for example, who made such a truly great vow, I will not become a Buddha until the hells are empty. Seems like an eternally unachievable grand aspiration. But if we abstract this issue philosophically, it's actually about the relationship between the inevitability of cause and effect and free will. I would like to respectfully ask the Master for some guidance regarding this particular question that I have.
Actually, whether it's good begets good, evil begets evil, or you reap what you sow, this important theory, back when I was studying at the Teachers' College many years ago in my youth, we actually had a very knowledgeable and experienced teacher who very carefully and thoroughly explained you reap what you sow from the perspective of dialectical materialism and philosophy in great depth. Every day his views were in complete conflict with mine. Whenever he saw me, he would often look at me sideways, perhaps with a thoughtful expression. Occasionally I would deliberately debate with him on theoretical issues. Sometimes when he couldn't quite explain his reasoning clearly, he would start criticizing me. Both of us would argue. But later on things got better. After I became a monk, he also came to understand. I ran into him again later, and he was still very nice. But in reality, the saying, you reap what you sow, is a truly profound and significant principle of cause and effect. For example, if I killed in a past life, I will face retribution in a future life. When receiving this retribution, there is no one actually carrying it out. It's not that there's a God or someone else orchestrating it. It's not that everything has to be arranged one by one. It's not like that. It's a natural law. For example, if we plant a poisonous plant, the result, the plant that grows from it, it can't possibly turn into another kind of plant. It will always grow up to be poisonous. And if we plant sugarcane will naturally produce sugarcane as its fruit, just as expected. In the same way, if we do bad things and create negative karma, then the result will inevitably be suffering. This is how it works. And this kind of karmic retribution doesn't necessarily ripen immediately in this life from what I did in a previous life. As stated in the Buddhist scriptures, there is immediate retribution in this life, retribution in future lives, and retribution follows after several lifetimes. Sometimes it may ripen after many kalpas, after tens of thousands of years. The most detailed understanding of this cycle of cause and effect is known only to the Buddha. Ordinary Shravakas and Arhats, including some wise individuals, may not completely know the entire sequence of events from previous lives. In fact, this is a deeply profound philosophical principle. Therefore, many of the experiences we have in this life are related to our past lives. Through logical theory and careful inference and analysis, we can fully understand this concept clearly and completely. So, when we combine this important principle with philosophical reasoning and critical thinking, it should be said that it can be logically demonstrated. But if we sentient beings commit negative karma, will it be the case that I will not attain Buddhahood until the hells are empty? Will Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's vast and great vow not be fulfilled? There is no such fault. Because Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva merely made this vow, in reality he does not actually wait until the hells are empty before leaving. In Buddhist theory, there are specific teachings that demonstrate this. The fact that he made this solemn and sacred vow shows that his spirit is extremely noble and selfless, beyond measure. For example, if a teacher says with determination, I will not leave this place until I have taught all my students properly and well. In fact, there will always be new students. It is impossible for the teacher to finish teaching all the students before he dies. But it shows that he has especially lofty aspirations, which is already evident. So in Buddhism, regardless of whether it is the aspiration of Manjushri Bodhisattva or Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, their vow regarding the hells not being empty demonstrates the vastness of their resolve. It does not mean that at a certain point in time, when the hells are truly and completely empty, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will have nothing left to do and will all be laid off. There will be no such fault.
Hello, Master. I am a graduate student in philosophy. I have a question I'd like to ask you. We often say the mind should be free of distractions, free from wandering thoughts, and we should clear the mind. We should go from having many thoughts to fewer, to a single thought, and finally to none at all. The question I want to ask is, if we have compassion and kindness, for example, such as in our minds, those are also thoughts. So if there are really no thoughts, does that mean that those who have attained enlightenment or Buddhahood no longer have kindness or compassion?
That's right. Upon attaining Buddhahood, although there is no dualistic or discriminating compassion, there is still a non-discriminating universal love. the compassion that naturally arises in a state of non-discrimination is something that should exist. So, we move from having many discriminations to one, and from one to none at all. This is a step-by-step meditative practice in Chan Buddhism. When we practice, it's necessary for our minds to gradually settle down like this. But in our daily lives, we need to have love, kindness, and compassion, such as in our hearts and actions towards others. These two are not in conflict with each other. For example, when I am meditating, I can abide in such a state of mind. And when I come out of meditation, when I'm not meditating, I can do more good deeds and virtuous actions. In fact, these good deeds and acts help enhance and stabilize the meditative state you enter during meditation practice deeply. Therefore, when we cultivate such goodness and compassion, as I just mentioned earlier during our spiritual practice and development, it's like a boat crossing a wide river. We cannot ever abandon thoughts of goodness and compassion in life. At the very beginning, Chan Buddhism says, we should let go of both evil thoughts and good thoughts. All thoughts are the same in this regard. When you reach the highest state, although there is such a level, but before we reach that state, we should do our best to let go of evil thoughts and use good thoughts. While using them, you distinguish between being in meditation and entering meditation. When you come out of meditation, you should do good deeds, but in meditation, you do nothing. This is not a contradiction. The Buddha, in the Entering the Middle Way treatise, uses a special analogy. For example, when a potter starts out, he makes pottery through effort. In the end, there is no need for effort. It spins automatically. There was such a machine in ancient times. In the same way, when the Buddha was on the path, he continuously cultivated compassion through diligent effort. But in the end, a great compassion arises naturally, effortlessly, and spontaneously. This effortless great compassion, although it has no thoughts, the activities that benefit sentient beings continue to manifest naturally and unceasingly.
Hello, Master. I already asked you a question last night. I've come. I'm also a graduate student in the philosophy department. My two questions might be somewhat challenging to the boundaries of my fellow classmates here, so I hope everyone can be more tolerant. The first question is about Today, Master, you have come here to spread the Dharma. We know that when we look back at the history of various religions, we find that all religions emphasize conversion or taking refuge. For example, in Christianity, there were crusades to the east. Islam also had westward expeditions. Moreover, they attracted followers by offering incentives through tax policies. So, when it comes to Buddhism, we emphasize the Buddha saving those with karmic affinity. It's a natural process of salvation. Should people take refuge on their own, or is it a kind of guided conversion? Secondly, regarding the method of guidance, actually, both today and yesterday, you have shared a lot of Buddhist theory with us, but for someone like me, an ordinary person with neither wisdom nor insight, these theories are indeed quite profound for me. So I'd like to ask you, when it comes to these theories, our personal experience is actually very limited. Wittgenstein also told us that language is public and everyone can communicate with it, but the distinction between what can be said and what cannot be said is what's most important. So I have a question I'd like to ask you. Is it more important for us to share our experiences or to promote the theories? For Buddhist monks, is idolization more important or is secularization more important? I hope you can answer these two questions for me, Master. Thank you.
There are also a few Tibetan children here, right? How many are there? 4 in total. They should also ask questions if they have any. Do they have any questions or anything they would like to clarify? The first question from that student just now was, in Buddhism, we actually do not force people to take refuge. It is not a strict requirement that you must take refuge. Rather, it should always be voluntary. Wherever I am in any setting, when someone mentions becoming a monk, I tell them, think it over carefully. Ordaining is a big decision. Don't act on impulse. Take your time to consider. And when some mention wanting to take refuge, I also ask them to think it through carefully. If you truly feel it's necessary, then you can take refuge. But it's also not the case that we leave everything entirely up to personal choice and ignore it altogether. Sometimes we really hope that more people will have a faith. We do not compete for followers with Christianity or other religions. We do not need to seek out a market. That is not how we operate. But we do feel that when people lack faith, especially in a country as populous as China, people's hearts can feel very empty. In the West, like in traditional Christianity and Catholicism, basically in the US and Canada and other Western nations, Over 95% of people have strong faith in Buddhism, Christianity, or other major world religions and spiritual traditions. The public still has a certain sense of fulfillment, certainly. So from a personal perspective, I really hope that many people can have a faith. If a person has neither moral standards nor any religious faith whatsoever, then it seems like life feels especially empty and meaningless. Especially when people reach old age, they lack a sense of belonging and security. Many people without faith truly feel particularly lost and somewhat adrift. Therefore, from the perspective of being responsible to others, I sincerely hope that many people should have some kind of spiritual faith and belief system in life. Only in this way can their lives be truly meaningful and valuable to themselves. In Buddhism, we still tend to idolize or secularize things too much. Or, regarding our philosophy, I believe Buddhism is extremely profound, encompassing a vast and intricate system of thought and practice. We need both thorough theoretical study and consistent practical cultivation to truly understand it. If you are only highly proficient in theory, mastering concepts and memorizing teachings, but never put them into practice in your daily life, your understanding remains incomplete. It's just like how I see many experts in universities nowadays who possess extensive academic knowledge but lack the real-world experience that comes from actually applying these teachings, including experts in religious studies who are very eloquent in what they say, but in reality they have never even contemplated the impermanence of human life themselves. In Buddhism, we call such people insincere practitioners, and it doesn't have much meaning. Some people don't understand any theory at all and just keep practicing and practicing in some monasteries without ever studying even basic theories. So why is it that Tibetan Buddhism is mainly focused on... Yesterday, when I was discussing with Professor Gao, we talked about debate, study, contemplation, and practice in Tibetan Buddhism. These are always inseparable from Buddhism.
I am from Damsheng County, in the Lhasa area of Tibet in China. I have two important questions to ask you today. One is, when everyone does full body prostrations and practices diligently, they recite many different sutras and sacred texts with devotion. The sutras they recite are actually quite different from each other, so I would like to ask, in your opinion, which sutra is better to recite? What is the best sutra to recite? And another question is, when I was at home before in my village, the adults and elders would say that everyone has two invisible record keepers on their shoulders watching them. One records the good deeds you do, and the other records the bad deeds you do constantly. I also read in Buddhist texts and scriptures that it says, on everyone's right arm and shoulder side, there is one spiritual being called Pola in the Tibetan language and tradition specifically and uniquely. And on the left arm, there is another called Mola. I want to ask you respectfully, are those two spiritual deities actually the same as the two record keepers mentioned before?
First of all, I am very grateful and happy indeed that our Tibetan children and students are also studying here at Central China Normal University successfully and doing well, along with many of our dedicated teachers and staff members. Yesterday, I also heard that the teachers care about them very much deeply. Although I myself am Tibetan by birth, I also care deeply and sincerely about Buddhist practitioners in the Han regions and areas. On the level of our shared knowledge and understanding, everyone should treat each other with love and compassion. The teachers are especially caring and supportive, and I am very happy and grateful about this. As Tibetan children and young students, some people also said yesterday, many of our languages and some of our important cultural traditions here have unfortunately been forgotten. I also want to emphasize this point to Tibetan university students. No matter which ethnic group you go to or where you go to study, you must not abandon your own cherished traditions, your own native language, and your own written script. Otherwise, as I have witnessed before, there are some Tibetan university students who, after returning to Tibetan area, basically could not speak Tibetan fluently. They couldn't practice many of the excellent and meaningful Tibetan traditions, which I deeply regret. Now, here in the Han region, there are so many intellectuals. They all go to Tibet to seek the profound Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan culture. Yet we ourselves have forgotten all the especially valuable traditions and customs of our own people and culture. We go to the Han region to study, and people from the Han region go to the West to study abroad. In the end, we all become westernized and lose ourselves. This is really truly not worthwhile, so for Tibetans, I think we should never forget our own inherent traditions. Look at many Han students studying abroad, going to the US or Canada. They are actually influenced by the West. But when it comes to their own traditional culture, when they return, they still speak Chinese as usual. We haven't seen Han people who go to study in the West or in Europe come back and only speak English, refusing to speak any Chinese at all. This doesn't happen among the Han, but among us Tibetans we see it often. After returning, after a few years in the Han region, they can only speak Chinese and can't speak Tibetan anymore. This is truly regrettable. So I sincerely hope that our Tibetan children, no matter which university they choose to attend for their higher education, will never abandon their own language, script or faith. At the same time, I will also answer the question you just asked. When we perform full body prostrations, we generally recite the refuge prayer, the 7-branch offering, and also as Karma Chagme Rinpoche said, a single prostration carries the merit of 100,000 recitations. So after reciting, it brings tremendous merit. That's why some of us recite this, while others recite, for example, by chanting the refuge prayer or Amitabha Buddha's name. Reciting any of these names is fine. In general, there are no strict limitations. You just mentioned that when we do good or bad deeds, there are different kinds of marks that appear on our hands. And you also said that there are different deities on our shoulders, with a white deity and a black deity recording the good and bad karma you accumulate throughout your life. Our Bardo teachings explain this, and similar ideas are in Han Chinese traditions, like records of journeys to hell and biographies of eminent monks. In the end, when one is in the afterlife, all the good and bad deeds from the human world are recorded. Actually, when we do good deeds, in the words of my perfect teacher, there is also a story about a Brahmin named Jakan. Whenever he did a good deed, he would make a mark for himself, and he would also make a mark when he did something bad. At first, he committed more bad deeds and did fewer good deeds. Later on, each time he would remind himself. Eventually, the number of good deeds he did kept increasing. Basically, he stopped doing bad deeds altogether. Of course, for some people who practice well, this might be possible. But we may not necessarily be able to achieve this ourselves. However, it is true that we have many Dharma protectors around us. There are many guardian deities of the body, and these guardians care about the good and bad deeds you commit. This truly does exist. Therefore, we should also respect some of these traditional beliefs. At the same time, when we perform good or bad deeds, it's actually similar to the practices of the ancients. We should frequently and thoughtfully examine ourselves and constantly observe our own behavior so that we can move toward the path of light.
The best moments always seem to pass the fastest. 2 hours can really go by in the blink of an eye. I think this morning's conversation and discussion was at a relatively high level of depth. At the very least, it was better and more profound than last night. The high level mainly comes from the fact that our teacher is truly exceptional, truly outstanding and remarkable. Our teacher truly deserves to be called a renowned and respected master. He enjoys such great prestige both in our world and within the Buddhist community. This is closely related to his personal realization and his solid scholarly foundation. These two aspects are inseparably and intricately linked together. So he is not just famous in name, as people often say. Moreover, he truly possesses the profound and comprehensive wisdom of the 5 sciences. He is not only a renowned teacher, but also an enlightened one. Here, enlightened means having wisdom and knowledge. In Buddhism, the 5 sciences refer to 5 kinds of wisdom and knowledge. Our teacher genuinely and truly lives up to and fulfills this title. Of course, our teacher's high-level performance is also related to the questions raised by the students this morning. If all the questions we asked were really very superficial, like the ones from last night, then no matter how high our teacher's level is, it wouldn't be apparent. It's just like a saying we often hear in universities: teaching benefits both teacher and student. With good students, there will definitely be good teachers. Without good students, there can't be good teachers. So if you want the standard at Huaxi to be high, you students must study well yourselves. If you don't understand anything yourself, how could Huaxi possibly have high-level teachers? So we must all understand this principle. Finally, let's give a warm round of applause to sincerely thank our teacher for the guidance given to him.